So, what is the agenda of this course? What are we going to actually talk about and learn here? Well, as you will see, the course is packed with content and we have a lot to learn and to talk. So, the first section is the obligatory welcome section, which we are in it right now. Next, we are going to talk about authentication basics, which covers the protocols and practices of authentication and authorization. Then we are going to have a quick introduction to Azure Active Directory. Now, since Azure Active Directory runs in the cloud, in the Azure cloud, then next we are going to have a quick introduction to the cloud in general. And after that, we are going to have first look at Azure, which is the cloud that Azure Active Directory runs in. And after that, we are going to learn and use basic Azure concepts. So this is going to wrap up the Azure part of this course, and then we are going to go back to Azure Active Directory and learn how to work with Azure Active Directory. Now, since the course is extremely practical, we are going to actually work with an app, a fictitious HR app, which will use Azure Active Directory and Azure AD B2C to implement authentication and authorization. And for that, we need to prepare our computer to run this app. And this is what we are going to do in the next section. And after preparing the environment, we are going to introduce our app and explain what exactly it's going to do. And then we are going to add authentication to our app using Azure AD. Now, our app is going to be developed using .NET. So right after that, we are going to see how to add authentication of Azure AD with other platforms such as Node.js and Python. In addition, we are going to learn how to authenticate when the client is a JavaScript client and also when the client is native client such as Windows. So now we have apps with authentication implemented using Azure Active Directory, and the next thing we are going to do is to customize this authentication, and we will talk about the various aspects that can be customized in the authentication of Azure AD. Next, we are going to talk about conditional access and MFA, which are two of the most advanced and important capabilities of authentication of Azure AD. After that, we are going to talk about authenticating API. So not only how to authenticate user-facing web apps, but also how to authenticate access to API. And that will conclude our discussion around Azure AD. And next we are going to talk about Azure AD B2C. And as part of this discussion, we are going to talk about user flows, which is perhaps the most important building block of authentication in Azure AD B2C. And after learning about them and implementing one, we are going to learn how to enhance user flow and make it more secure and flexible. After that, we are going to learn how to customize the user interface of the user flow, which is a very important aspect of the Azure AD B2C and is much more advanced than what is possible in Azure AD. Then we are going to learn about identity providers and how to integrate social providers such as Facebook and Google to our authentication. And next we are going to implement API connectors, allowing customizing the behavior and logic of the authentication process. After that, we will discuss custom policies, which allow absolute flexibility in the authentication flow. And then we are going to learn how to implement single sign-on in our authentication. And after that, we are going to conclude this course and discuss about the next steps. So, as I said before, this course is packed with content and we have quite a lot to talk about. And now let's do just that and move on to the next section.